struggle to adjust to change with the changes of culture at large in society, in Western culture. The 20th century featured rapid cultural changes, and that rapid cultural change continues to take place in this new century, and music especially changed rapidly in the last century. And before that, the musical styles moved along very slowly because the culture itself moved very slowly, and so the musical culture in the church was often right alongside the culture of the rest of the culture at large. But when things started to speed up in the culture last century, culture began to move very quickly, moving away from what it had been, and the church really struggled to keep up with that. In fact, realizing that it was changing so rapidly, rather than do any kind of changes, they put their stakes in the ground and declared, "We shall not be moved." Now, I know I'm speaking a very difficult truth for some of you, because some of you were some that put the stake in the ground. Meanwhile, the culture continued to move forward, and we see a distinction that arose for some time as the culture changed and the church refused to change with the culture. And rather than help the churches make slow adjustments, but sure adjustments and changes, there were many church leaders like myself that fell in lockstep with the popular opinion that was in the pew, and so the church did not change. And here's the result. Eventually, as new generations came along, they became frustrated with what was going on in worship, and realizing that it was difficult for them to reach others in their age group that were not in the church yet. And so new churches began to emerge. New churches began, you see churches split over worship style. You see some churches having people who get disenfranchised and they leave, and which happened to this church, and they go off and they start a new church that is radically different. Meanwhile, older, more resistant churches continue to embrace a musical style that mostly in a larger culture, many are having trouble to connect with. Now, I know this is difficult for you to hear, but I'm telling you, I wish I had said this in every pastorate that I've been a part of. But it's a truth.
Amen.
We've decided to hold on to some things, and when we couldn't find a way to get together on things, we split our church. How did we do it? We started a second worship service so that some people can have it their way and another group can have it their way. Rather than changing and finding a way to be unified on something other than worship style and be more so unified in our faith in Jesus Christ, we decided to put our stakes in the ground. But listen, if we're going to get our worship right, this is going to be tough for some of you because we've not always had leaders who have been what they should have been. But if we're going to get our worship right, you're going to have to start trusting church leadership.
Amen.
I know that's tough, especially if you've been a part of churches, and I've been a part of churches where I've had to come behind and be a part of help restoring and putting back together after the damage of a leader who didn't lead as he should have led. But in order to trust your leaders, that means you've got to let your leaders lead if God has called them to be your leaders. And followers follow. Now, I know that can come across as self-serving since I'm a leader. But I promise you, I have to stand before God and answer to Him for how I lead this congregation.
Amen.
And I'm telling you, as your pastor, what we need to do is we need to diminish worship style, and we need to be unified over more important things than changing, fluctuating cultural things. Amen?
Amen.
Here's the